Borrowing strength builds weakness. It builds weakness in the borrower because it reinforces dependence on external factors to get things done. It builds weakness in the person forced to acquiesce, stunting the development of independent reasoning, growth, and internal discipline. And finally, it builds weakness in the relationship. Fear replaces cooperation, and both people involved become more arbitrary and defensive. Quote from Stephen Covey's classic, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I remember reading this quote for the first time. Ecstatic. I immediately stopped reading and gleefully wrote down every word. The next day, I shared it with all of my coworkers, who equally loved it. You see, we all shared the same bad boss. Our boss's "because I told you so" culture demoralized us, instilling fear instead of hope and passion. And to me, this quote does summarize why bad bosses struggle. Achieving compliance through bossiness alone does come at a serious price. But really, this concept also applies to all managers, parents, and people of authority. And as rent collectors, we fall into the people of authority category. Late payments can get personal. I found myself offended, disappointed, angry, and an assortment of negative emotions, especially when a tenant breaks a promise. In those especially personal situations, you understandably become enraged. With authority and power in your back pocket, the easy route becomes threatening, angrily demanding payment. You borrow the strength of your authority, which builds weakness in that tenant-landlord relationship. But they didn't pay their rent. Doesn't that tenant deserve and expect that treatment? You see, that's flawed logic, because no one plays the bad guy in their own story. Think about it. When someone gets confrontational with you, do you stop and go, "Wow, I'm being a real jerk here"? No! You get defensive. You find reasons why the opponent, not you, is in the wrong. And even if you admit you are the one in the wrong, usually you go, "Well, he didn't have to be such a jerk about it." Now, if you have ever been in a spot where you have to decide what bills you'll pay this month and what you'll let go, then you know how embarrassing and often degrading that can feel. It's a situation ripe for ego bruising, defensiveness, lies, manipulation, and ugliness. A good collector understands the psychology behind this situation and then uses that knowledge to maneuver through this psychological minefield, walking away with the money owed. What's more important? Winning an argument and teaching someone a lesson, or collecting the rent money? In the moment, it can be easy to forget that. On this skills series, we will take a deep dive into the lifeblood of our industry: collections.
Warning. This podcast features the truth about owning and operating mobile home parks. The following program is not designed to be sexy. It will not hype you up on MHPs. Rather, this is a raw take on this industry and how you find your own path to success. Welcome to MHP IRL, Mobile Home Parks in Real Life, with your host, Ryan Norris.
Obviously, by leading with that Stephen Covey quote, you can tell I'm going to eviscerate no pay, no stay. No pay, no stay is a great feel-good story for landlords. The first I heard the practice, I loved it. I vividly envisioned the arguments I'd win and the collections issues at properties I could solve with that simple, tough love, zero tolerance approach. At the time I heard of no pay, no stay, I did not own a mobile home park. I had only ever rented a single-family home to two separate tenants, both friends of mine, and both essentially never paid me. I failed hard. Naturally, no pay, no stay intoxicated me. I swore by the practice. Until I actually became a debt collector. More specifically, until I became a mobile home park debt collector. You see, when people own their own homes, evictions become complicated if you want the lot occupied in short order. I've said before, and I will say again, an abandoned home can hold a lot hostage for months, preventing you from moving someone else's property, replacing it with a different income-generating mobile home. To be fair, no pay, no stay might work in something like an apartment complex where ultimately you own the asset. But a mobile home park landlord of mostly tenant-owned homes must proceed with caution, not with force. So how do we collect on delinquent tenants who have more leverage over us since they own their own home? We'll cover that and more. Chapter 1. Why people don't pay. If we want to understand how to collect from someone, we first need to understand why they aren't paying. Intuitively, this should be obvious. We are dealing with affordable housing, meaning a lot of our tenants simply don't earn enough income. The United States is expensive. One medical bill not covered by insurance can bankrupt a person. Student loans run rampant, while college degrees don't carry the weight they once did. Big companies employ pricing experts that find the optimal price point for products. All this to say, we live in a capitalistic society, and we deal largely with people that live paycheck to paycheck. Most delinquent payers, in my experience, don't want to pay you late. They simply think they don't have a choice. And I'll highlight that word think there. More on this later. It's easy for us to say, well, go get a job, or stop spending your money on stupid things. It's harder to stop and try to understand what someone is going through. If you come from sales, like I do, you can probably guess where I'm going with this. In sales, step 1 is always to understand your potential client. What are her needs, wants, financial limitations, etc.? The more you can paint a picture of who this potential client is, the better you can tailor your sales pitch to suit her needs. Sales isn't Billy Mays. Billy Mays was a pitchman, which is part of sales, but only a small piece. Sales primarily is about solving problems. And how do you solve a problem? Well, it'd be silly to start trying to solve a problem before you even knew what the problem was. So start by asking. Sometimes you can make it as simple as, I see you didn't pay your rent on time. Is everything okay? Yes, you will run into people who buy stupid things, get addicted to drugs, or simply don't respect you as a landlord. We'll cover how to handle those later. But for now, know that most of your tenants that pay late won't be bad people. Your goal shouldn't be to demonize them or instill fear in them, but rather to sell them. Sell them on why. If they can only afford to pay 3 of their 10 bills this month, that you should be one of those 3. And good news, you have a very compelling argument. People need shelter. Chapter 2. The Psychology of Delinquency. So why doesn't no pay, no stay work, and why did I lead with that quote from Stephen Covey? Simply put, fear and panic won't help your customers pay their bills faster. If the paycheck doesn't arrive until the 15th and the rent becomes late on the 6th, this person will always pay late if living paycheck to paycheck. Research shows that financial trouble can cause depression, anxiety, and other mood disorders in consumers. So you most likely face people struggling in several aspects of their lives. If someone struggles with any of those issues, and your answer is to be a jerk to them, you'll likely be met with defensiveness, aggression, or indifference. Yes, indifference. They'll ignore, downplay, or pretend the issue doesn't exist to escape the pain. Someone that deludes themselves into thinking money will come out of nowhere and they'll be able to pay you at that time with no plan of increasing income may need to be filed on, since a court date may be the only way to force them to face reality. But someone truly in a temporary, tough spot should be handled completely differently. All of this to say, different delinquent tenants require different strategies to collect. Why put all this effort into people? Why not just replace them with someone who will respect you and pay you on time? The truth isn't that simple. Again, if they own their own home, they have leverage over you, as they could disappear in the middle of the night, costing you months of no rent. If the tenant is normally solid, but ran into trouble, you might consider working with them. I've had this go both ways, where the tenant, to date, hasn't been late since, and when they never had plans to catch up to begin with, and they just bought themselves more time. But imagine the damage you could cause in a relationship if it's the former and not the latter. Strong tenant relationships come with some serious benefits and property insights you'll cost yourself by burning any trust they have with you. Beyond why no pay, no stay doesn't work, let's next zoom in on debt collection practices. As much as no pay, no stay can backfire, it actually can be very effective in certain situations. All of this to say, there is no one-size-fits-all. So, let's cover what options you do have. Chapter 3. Make contact. The National Multifamily Housing Council recently announced that usually, by the 6th of the month, high-end apartments collect about 81%. Think about that. 19% of high-end apartment renters don't pay on time. Across our 10 mobile home parks, on average, we don't achieve 81% until the 11th. By the 30th, high-end apartments hit 98+, which is consistent with other residential sectors, and we even experienced that same 98% plus on our own properties. So most everyone pays by the 30th. What techniques get properties to that level? Believe it or not, a lot of people simply forget. Sometimes it is just as simple as making contact. Think about how many of your bills are set up on autopay. For folks without bank accounts, which constitutes a shockingly higher percentage of people than you may think, they'll have to get their paychecks cashed, converted into money orders, then drop them off or mail them in. This takes time. With several kids, or a busy life, and oftentimes a short window between when the paycheck hits and when the rent is due, several people won't be able to help being a few days late. As of this recording, we have 424 tenants under our management. We find texting works the best. Phone calls can be time-consuming. 20% of 424 residents equates to roughly 80 tenants. If your average phone call takes 5 minutes, that's over 6 hours of calls. Software companies like Rent Manager or Grasshopper offer options to make mass texts relatively easy to pull off too. That way, you can reserve calls for more complicated situations that truly require a call. Why not put a note on someone's door? Notes on doors scare and embarrass people. I once got chewed out for a note on a gentleman's door who had paid days before, but we had just closed on the property and the former owner's records of days leading up to closing weren't well kept. That shouting match could have been avoided with a text message asking for clarification. Sometimes you do need to leave a note. Like if you don't have a good phone number or if people are obviously not taking you seriously. Most of the time, notes just break down trust, especially if someone is late for a benign reason. Like they dropped coupons in the rent box by accident instead of a money order. I've had that happen before. My text of, "I notice your rent hasn't been paid. Is everything okay?" received a response of, "I am so sorry, I dropped the wrong envelope." She dropped off her rent within an hour, texted me about it, and included a late fee, which I waived and credited her next month. She loved that. By simply politely asking if she was okay, I built trust between us. Can you imagine how much of a jerk I would have looked like had I pulled a no pay, no stay confrontation? Chapter 4. Set dates. Obviously, you can't make contact if you have outdated information. Whenever I get a call, email, text, or note from a tenant, I double check that I have their contact information correct in our tracking software. This information gathering includes family, friends, or other contacts I know my tenant frequently communicates with. In affordable housing, the cell phone bills often go unpaid before other things like water and power, so it is not uncommon for people to switch numbers frequently. This is a big reason why notes on doors do become necessary at some point, especially if you don't know the tenant's friends, family, or other connections. I can't stress how crucial good contact information is. I learned the hard way in sales that poor information gathering results in missed sales, since you can't follow up with potential clients. Once you make contact with your delinquent tenant, you need to push for a date. Don't settle with, "It'll be in by the end of the month." You should be able to get something like, "Well, I just started a new job and my first paycheck will be on the 20th. Great, so you should be able to pay me by, at latest, the end of day on the 21st. Can I count on your rent money being in by then? If you sense a tenant is just dodging to buy time, then you need to press forward with whatever your state allows for eviction filings. For example, in North Carolina, you must put a 10-day notice on the front door. In certain counties, you actually need to have a third party serve the eviction notice to the tenant before you can get a court date. This all to say, if you struggle getting someone to commit to a specific date, they likely are deluding themselves into thinking somehow the money will just show up. And as you know, life doesn't work that way. You need to apply pressure to deny people the luxury of escaping reality and not allow them to ignore what's at stake. Once you have a date, keep a record of that date. If the 22nd rolls around and that tenant that got paid on the 20th hasn't delivered, reach back out. What happened? Did you drop off the wrong envelope? Was there an issue with the check? Did the 20th fall on a Friday and everything was closed until Monday the 23rd? A missed date can either be an honest mistake or someone buying themselves time. Sometimes it can be a bit of both. Like I said, people usually do want to pay you, but you need to flex your muscle depending on your read of the situation. Chapter 5. Make it easy. Make things easy. Make it so easy to pay that they have no excuse. We put secure rent boxes on each property. We set up online pay. We allow auto pay. We have a P.O. box. With a tenant's permission, we will save their bank information so all they have to do is drop us a line to go ahead and draft the funds. The more ways someone can pay you, the more likely one way proves very convenient for them. A lot of folks ask me why I don't force everyone to pay one way, like online or through Walmart. Again, while this story makes a lot of sense, it's just a feel-good story. That doesn't make practical sense in scale. And I want to emphasize the in-scale portion, as I have met a lot of people that have found success on smaller scales with cool strategies like auto bank drafts and Walmart pays. But this becomes trickier with more properties. Debt collectors that thrive will tell you the easier they can make it for people to pay their debts, the more luck they have collecting. In sales, I always carried a pen with me. In fact, I carried 2 pens, just in case one died on me. Why? Because if someone said yes, I wanted to make it as easy and quick as possible for them to sign something, triggering consistency bias. This same trick of the sales trade applies to rent collections. If someone has the money on them, make it as easy as possible for them to pay right away. Chapter 6. Avoiding court. I hate going to court. It costs money. It costs time. Even when you win, you lose. Putting someone on the streets should never be taken lightly, and even when it is well-deserved and your other tenants thank you for getting out a bad egg, it still wears on you. You do have options to avoid court. First, cash for keys. You can literally offer to pay someone to move out. I've done this many times in the past. Money talks. Sadly, this strategy works especially well with drug addicts. Like going to court, this too will wear on you. Witnessing people destroy their lives and knowing that you're a small part of their self-destruction hurts. But you can't save the world. You can, however, provide everyone else in the community with a safe, clean place to live. You can also, in a way, broker sales. You, as a property owner, want to screen the incoming tenant. The outgoing tenant wants as much money as possible for their mobile home. Assuming they have the title and you have the connections, you can literally just connect your pre-approved buyer with the seller and let them work out a deal amongst themselves. Just be careful if you try to profit from this, as certain states may require licenses for brokerage fees. Partial payments also stave off court dates. Although a slippery slope, partial payments can come back to reward you. I've had plenty of folks rack up high water bills or lose their job only to set up a short-term payment plan and chip away at a balance over a couple of months. But be careful, as these can spiral out of control. But if you do decide to try a partial payment strategy, make sure you set a date for the next installment. Chapter 7. Eviction Court. If you want to learn about collections quickly, go spend a day in the magistrate court. It won't cost you more than your time, and in an especially busy magistrate court, you'll hear tons of cases within a few short hours. You'll notice quickly that excuses boil down to a handful of buckets. Over and over, you'll hear versions of, "My landlord didn't fix X," or "This home is dangerous," or "I'll pay you this coming Thursday." You'll notice the vocal tonality and general cadence of each counter-argument, and through only a few iterations, you'll quickly know which bucket to assign which excuse to. Armed with this knowledge, you'll be able to better spot which of your tenants may be workable and which clearly have no intention of paying you. While each delinquent tenant situation is unique, it'll all boil down to one question. Do I work with them or evict as soon as possible? And that is the real art of collections. You'll need to know when to take a risk on someone and when to part ways. If taking a risk, like always, you need to set parameters to help you mitigate that risk in the event the gamble doesn't pan out. This applies to both working with someone and pushing for eviction straight away. You need to understand the costs associated with each risk. What happens if I wait too long to get someone out? What happens if I push a tenant too hard and destroy a fruitful relationship? The skill comes in by applying pressure without sacrificing the relationship. But when it's time, eviction court is the leverage you need to remove the ones you truly can't work with. Chapter 8. Miscellaneous Tactics. Collections boil down to this: be in contact, be firm but friendly, and be ready to flex your leverage via eviction court if dates and promises aren't met. The art comes in when deciding which risk to take, giving someone a chance or parting ways. And the better job you do screening on the front end, the less you'll have to make those tough decisions. But what other tricks can you use to encourage strong collections? I've seen discounts of, say, $25 if payments come in on time. I've seen late fees be waived for promises being kept. I've seen interest-free payment plans. There are plenty of clever ways you can work with folks. But again, it all comes down to being in contact, being firm but friendly, and being ready to evict when promises aren't kept. While I have no data to back up the efficacy of those tricks, I'll say this: in scale, simplicity pays. While over simplicity, like no pay, no stay, fails, you need to find a balance between employing too many tactics and too cookie cutter a strategy. How does our niche collect versus the market? Retail collected an average of just 58% in April of 2020, down from 96% during the same period last year. Depending on which dataset you look at, industrial was the only sector that collected better than mobile home parks, but we're talking the difference of 99% and 98% collected. The point here is that even during a pandemic, mobile home parks perform well. Let's zoom in to our space. Looking at the aggregate whole, not just adjusting for statistical noise, my properties have historically collected about 51% of total rents by the 6th. By the 11th, we hit 81%, and by month end, we average over 99% collected. Mind you, we deal mostly with heavy turnaround projects, so front-loaded collections issues, home sales, lease option payments, and general lumpy deposits add fuzziness to those averages. That being said, collections for my properties seem to be in line with collections on mobile home parks in aggregate, according to publications like Northmark. What does this mean? It means that I can't say with statistical significance if I actually collect better than your average operator. When the national average hovers around 98%, there's not much room for improvement or differentiation. Also, what that shows is that consumers of affordable housing in the mobile home park space typically pay. So really, collections in theory shouldn't be overly difficult. What does that mean for you? It means if you aren't collecting at 95% plus several years into ownership, you need to start employing different tactics. Now, while I can't say that once I stabilize a property, that my rent collections are statistically significantly better than the aggregate average, I can look at how my properties collected when I bought them versus a year later. The results pop off the page. I've taken properties where collections sat at 33% on the 15th. I've taken over properties where certain tenants hadn't paid in years. Literally. Those same properties now collect like champs. So admittedly, while I'd be simply just peddling you a feel-good story if I were to tell you that my tactics work on an already stabilized property, I can say, however, with confidence, that what we discussed today does work when taking over a property with existing collections issues or addressing building collections issues on a property you already own. I'd like to say we're different, smart, or highly skilled. Truth is, we're just persistent, empathetic, well-connected, and creative. This is a people business. Emotional intelligence goes a long way. If you want to see the matrix, just open up a dialogue. You'll be shocked at how a little persistence and empathy can work wonders for collections, while the tough guy attitude just isolates people, yet is a necessary card to play in certain situations. Entrepreneurs make mistakes, but with the overwhelming amount of free information out there, you don't have to be doomed to making those same mistakes. You just have to find a consolidated version of the most important information. What if I told you I'll gift you all of my DD mistakes I've made over the years for free? Just leave me a 5-star review, screenshot the review after it goes live, and email it to me at my website, archimedesgrp.com. Afterwards, join our Facebook group, Mobile Home Park Mastermind. You'll find hundreds of other mobile home park owners sharing ideas, contractors, and deals. It's free to join, and we would absolutely love having you join us.